Hello from Radio Studio C at MediaCity. It's Talking Salford, a podcast from the University of Salford that brings you the stories of former Salfordians. I'm Lachlan Campbell and I'm today's host for this episode, which is our final guest interview of Season 2, and one I'm delighted to be in our studio for. Joining me at MediaCity is none other than sports commentator Chris Sharples. Chris, welcome back to Salford.
Thank you.
It's really cool to have you with us today. But who is Chris Sharples then? So, originally from Blackpool, Lancashire, Chris is a Salford graduate from 2007 who left us with a degree in journalism and broadcasting. Chris has gone on to become a commentator of many sports, becoming a real chameleon of the profession. Football was his first love, and that was where he got his break as a correspondent for Channel M, the former free-to-air TV station, where he commentated for the Great Manchester Football Show. Covering non-league football, Chris built up his experience in the sport, travelling all over the country. An opportunity then came to do some radio commentary for Rochdale FC before Chris took the plunge and headed to London for more opportunities. He secured commentary work with a betting company commentating on international games before he was brought in by Gravity Media, who have contracts for the global feed of the UEFA Champions League and Europa League games. Chris was soon then commentating on European football every weekend, and he continues to be a regular commentator on the Bundesliga for its global feed, and he's worked on coverages for leagues in France, Japan, China, Holland, Portugal, and even as far afield as Argentina, Brazil, Ecuador, Chile, and Bolivia. But it's not just football. Chris has also worked on the commentary during the Olympics and lending his voice to coverage of hockey and handball at the Games, and also does some work for the International Field Hockey League. In September of this year, he was over in Bukhara, Uzbekistan for the Futsal World Cup. So, Chris, like many roles within the sports media, sports commentary, it's a bit of a niche but quite a fascinating position. So, where did the initial interest come from?
I just always wanted to do it. I was always fascinated by watching football on Sky as a kid. And when they handed to the commentators and they were there in vision and you could see that they had the best, seat in the house. They were up on these rickety old gantries, some of them. They were looking very cozy up there. And I just thought, that's great. And they get to talk about football. I could never play it. So I thought, well, give it a try, see what we can do in sort of talking about it. So the old cliche of pretending to be a commentator over it's like old FIFA games and that sort of thing. And also, whenever there was games on, I'd do my own thing. So that's where the interest came from, really.
I think you're speaking to a whole generation there. We're talking about commentating over FIFA games.
Yes, used to be Sabutio or something like that of the older generation, I guess. But FIFA, that was my thing.
And was it always this idea that they just seemed to have the most fun job, really? Was that what was appealing, or was it just you had such a massive interest in watching football, you wanted to find a career where you could then do something where you were active then talking about the game in a really cool position?
A bit of both, really. I just really enjoyed the thought of going to football matches and working at football matches. And if you can do that by becoming a bit of a storyteller at the same time, that was always my great interest, really.
I think when it comes to being, particularly in football, you are in a unique role where you are, as you say, shaping the story of the viewer's experience. How they view the game really changes depending on what the commentary is. So in your mind, who was your big inspiration for how you kind of crafted your own voice on the game?
So Martin Tyler at Sky Sports is my biggest hero. And it was always watching him and Andy Gray, Richard Keys at the time on Sky, the peak of their powers, really, during the 90s and the early noughties, which really sort of, that was like, all right, I want to be like you. Clive Tilsley on a midweek Champions League night, ITV, watching United and Arsenal when they were in it all the time. Those were my guys. But Martin certainly was he was the one that I thought, right, if I was to learn off anybody, it would be him, just in terms of the way that he spoke, the way that he explained things, the way that he called a goal, which is pretty important. Not to be too OTT on certain things, language. he was the one, because for me, he just makes it sound so simple. It might not be the right word, but just easy to listen to and to explain. And so, yeah, he was the one that really sort of saw, right, I want to be like you.
Because you mentioned there, when it comes to calling the goal, that's one of the most important parts of football commentary.
Yeah.
Is it also a little bit about being able to kind of have a flavour with language and being able to really kind of paint a picture, I guess, with your words about what you're seeing on the pitch? I think you mentioned Peter Drury there. And I've always seen him as kind of a high standard of sometimes almost the poetic license he uses to describe football. But where do you see kind of the level of importance, being able to, I guess, to keep the audience going and entertained, but also like having those iconic, as you say, those big goal moments?
It's very, in terms of, television and radio discipline, it's very different. So I think you can be very, very, out there with your words when it comes to radio, because nobody can see what's happening.
Yeah.
Whereas with television, people can see what's happening. And so you don't need to say too much sometimes for a goal call, because people can see, what it means, the emotion. I look back to Guy Mowbray, for example, during the Euros final when Cole Palmer scored.
Yeah,
he barely said anything, but he didn't need to say anything. That's the great thing. And what he did say was just then to the point, and then he let Alan come in and he did the rest as the co-com. Whereas in radio, you can have far more license to really go and explain things. So it's very different. And listen, Peter's a legend of, in terms of what he says and how he describes things. That's his style. Everybody's different. Everybody has their style. So, there are ways of going about a goal call. You don't have to be too over the top, but then you don't have to say too much at all, depending on the situation.
So talk to me about how you then target a career in this field then. When was Salford kind of your chosen route into this?
The links that they had at the time to, not quite the same as what it is here now, but the links that they had to local radio, BBC in particular, and Channel M at the time that you mentioned in the intro, they had a really good sort of collaboration with them. So they were good ins, and I thought, I didn't want to move too far away from home, being from Blackpool. Loved Manchester. And my auntie and uncle came to Salford as well, so there's a bit of history in the family as well. And I didn't actually get enough points to gain here, actually. I had to come for an interview in the end, and I sat down with Mike Hemfield, it was at the time, he was the course leader. And I clearly did something right in passing the interview and getting in. And so, knowing those sort of ins and the reputation of Salford University as well in terms of its media sort of pathways and that, they were good eye openers, certainly.
What are the big memories from your time as a student that jumps to mind this morning?
I think it was just a good buzz. It was, when you had Castle Irwell down the road at the time, which was the main hub of, where everybody seemed to live. I didn't in first year. I kind of stayed away from it. It was a bit of a regret of mine, actually, that I didn't go down there, whether you were on the dark side or the light side, as they used to put it. Some good some good nights at the Pav. Way back when, but just the overall buzz of the place, really. It had something about it, and Salford's great as a city as well. So they were good times.
You did some work with Shock Radio when you were here, which is one of our flagship radio stations still to this very day, and you were head of sports. So what were the kind of stuff that you were doing from a student radio perspective back then?
So we had a show on a Wednesday night and a show on a Saturday. And so Saturday was your usual, go through all the scores. There was a few other guys with us as well. And, you go through the scores. We used to send somebody to FC United in Manchester because it was fairly sort of easy to get in there and do reports from there. So we used to send somebody there, bless them, the same person every week. So we used to send them out. So we had some sort of like, reporter on the ground, if you like, at a game. And we'd do that whilst it was just your normal radio show. And then on a Wednesday night, we'd have more of a sort of discussions and topics and things like that on a Wednesday. But also, we'd get people doing the sports news at the main news at 6 o'clock, and you'd stay and do the sports news as well. And it was just good. It was just good in experience to do it, to see what it was about and learn. In particular, just learn. And yeah, they were our sort of things on Shock Radio.
And one of the things which I know we talked about previously was the opportunity you had being in Manchester and Salford at a really unique time, particularly with the access from the course. And I remember you saying that you went to some press conferences over the years, particularly getting over to some Champions League conferences with Man United. So talk to me a little bit about the access and opportunities you got through that.
So, yeah, that was through our sports journalism course in second year, I think it was. And it didn't last for very long in terms of the year. I wish we could have done more of it. But Pete Layden, who was our sports journalism tutor, he managed to get us across the road to Old Trafford to go to a Ferguson press conference. It was against Villarreal, if I remember rightly. And then we managed to get tickets to go to the game the following night, and it was awful. It was 0-0. But the fact that we were in there and we were able to, there was a lot of United fans in our group as well. So you sat there and you're like, wow, that's Sir Alex Ferguson sort of doing his thing. But it was just being amongst the press and what it's all about, and listening to the style of questions that people were asking, listening to the responses of Sir Alex or Edwin van der Sar, who was the player at the time. Great stuff. There was tons of stuff where you could really sort of get a look at what the industry was all about.
So when it came to becoming a sports commentator and picking up with Channel M, what were the key skills that you felt like you had to learn, and how did you train yourself in preparation for those kind of roles?
So as a commentator, notes and research and preparing and making sure you've got everything on each play. It's a bit difficult in non-league. There's not too much out there sometimes. But also, learning to do post-match interviews, style of questions, trying to remember the match, if you like. So whilst honing your sort of style and what you want to do as a commentator, there was other things like asking questions to coaches, how to deal with coaches if they've just been beaten, for example, if they've been beaten heavily, if they give you short answers, how do you respond to those sort of things? They were good groundings, really. Tricky coaches. So yeah, they were the probably the main things for me as well, and also keeping warm in the winter. It was getting used to that sort of thing, being in a quite a remote place in Glossop or something like that in the height of December, when you can't feel your fingers afterwards or your toes. So getting used to all of that, I'd say they were the core things to remember.
Do you remember looking back on any of those first few games, what any of them were and how you prepared, and how did you deal with those cold nights?
Wrap up a lot. My first one was Tranmere against Manchester City reserves at Prenton Park on I think it was a November night. And it was freezing, and it was just me. And basically what we had was there was a cameraman, and I'd just plug into the camera in a lit mic, no cans or anything like that. And so the first one, I've heard it actually recently, listening back, and it's proper cringe, but like not sort of like, I'm just thinking of, there was nobody in the stadium, but then I'm more concerned about people hearing me, getting loud and what have you. So it was one of those. It was more a confidence thing in each game, really, to try and boost your voice, boost your confidence doing the game, feeling more relaxed doing the game. And from then on, going to places like Chorley and Staley Bridge and Ashton and Hyde. You kind of, the more you did it, the more confident you get.
I think confidence must be a big thing because you're a performer, really. You're constantly talking to people. You're having to keep people aware of what's happening at any given moment in time, whether it's radio or TV. you have to be in the moment and you have to be a performer. Like, you have to be entertaining, you have to be enthusiastic. So that's quite a mentally taxing profession from what it sounds like. So how did you cope with that side of it?
Yeah, I mean, you can come back from games and you can be. I get quite tired after games. I know some guys who are absolutely buzzing and they'll need to go off and do something else. But I'm quite sort of I'm quite tired after a game. So yeah, you've got to knowing the story, knowing the storylines, keeping on top of that, because there's always one person who is watching it who is a fan of each team, and they want to be interested in that particular story, and they're engrossed in that team, and it could be the biggest game for that one person. So you've got to be on it, and you've got to be, you can't be losing track of things and skimming your way through it. It's some professional at the same time. So yeah, it can be quite a taxing thing, but at the same time, it's incredibly rewarding when you've come away from doing it. I did Bayern at the weekend, and Harry Kane scoring another hat-trick, and when you come away from those sort of games, having called those moments, you feel good after it, certainly.
So let's talk about how you find your voice then, because obviously I think many people would maybe impersonate their favourite commentator because that's what they're so used to hearing. So how did you find your unique, authentic voice for commentary?
I don't know, really. I honestly don't know. I think, there's an air of professionalism I think you've got to give to when you are sort of broadcasting, but at the same time, you've got to balance that with just being natural. So, there are people who have really distinctive voices. I got told once that I didn't have a distinctive voice. I just sounded like everybody else. So that was, I needed to change in a way to try and make sure I did sound a bit different so people would notice me. I don't know whether that's worked or not, but, clearly with the gigs that I've been getting recently, I'd like to think I'm doing something right and the voice is right and suitable. But I don't know, in terms of honing, I don't know. I don't remember. There was times listening to, the guys that I mentioned, like of Martin Tyler and Clive Tilsley, where you do take bits of how they say things maybe and you put it together, but it's all about your own thing. People trying to copy people doesn't work. Just having your own style and your own tone is what makes you and the commentator that you are. So I didn't try to copy anybody, but I would take little bits and put it together, and hopefully that's kind of, it does come off in the things that I say.
I'd imagine the feedback you might get is listen back to yourself and kind of self-evaluate. But how hard do you find that? Yeah,
I mean, listen, if you have setbacks, it's all about how you sort of respond to those setbacks. So I got a few in my early career, probably a bit naive in approaching certain organisations and going, "Hi, I'm a commentator. I've been on the scene for 5 minutes. Have you got any jobs?" Looking back is a bit cringe, but when people come back and they do actually give you specific feedback, it's always good. I find it good to sort of, right, okay, that's what you think, so I'll go away, improve it, and I'll come back stronger and better on it. So, there was one company that really sort of took me to town, actually, in terms of my style, and I was like, right, okay, I need to, go away. I'll prove you wrong. And, we've gone on and got other things after that negative, I'd say positive feedback, actually, to then go off and do other things. So, yeah, it kind of, you take it on the chin, work on it, and then, go and prove people wrong.
How much do you listen back to yourself now? Is it something you do occasionally, or particularly if you feel like you've had a really good game or something, do you feel the need to listen back, or are you one of those people that you just can't stand the sound of your own voice?
Yeah, I'll listen back. I hate being in a... So when I was in Uzbekistan for the futsal recently, at the World Cup, in our office, they wanted to listen back to certain things to make sure everything was okay in terms of the TV side of it. And so even with just 2-3 other people in it, and then there's my comms on there, I'm wincing in the corner, just because people are listening to me. Whereas if it's just me on my own, I can, with some cans on, going through, putting like a show reel together or whatever, I'm fine with that. But I hate when other people are listening. and I don't know why, but yeah, that can be a bit cringe. But I will listen back, and I like to think that my goal calls are to see if my goal calls are okay, and if there are things that I can tweak that I can take into the next game. I don't tend to listen back to the full 90 minutes, but there are certain areas where I will listen back and think, okay, we could do better there, language, explanation, that sort of thing.
So in your role, we talked a lot about football, and you just mentioned futsal there, but you've covered a lot of different sports over the years, and you've been able to go around the world and travel and been able to do this. And I think it's quite a clearly talented thing to be able to switch from football to hockey to futsal. How much is that the norm now, for sports commentators to be able to have to be so multifaceted but still know their way around lots of different sports?
Yeah, I mean, when I started out, there was the thought of being, say, like a multi-sport commentator. Didn't really come into the psyche. For me, especially, it didn't really come into the psyche. So it got to a point probably about 6-7 years ago where I thought, well, you could probably do with doing something else as well. So that's when hockey came along, and the FIH had been great. And it was, hockey is it's the same as football in a way that you've got there is a ball and you've got to get the ball in the goal, and it's 11 players, similar sort of styles in terms of commentary that I could stick to, and yeah, that was a great in for me. And I've always had a fascination with hockey through Olympics, Commonwealth Games, so that was a good in. But in terms of now, there are so many sports out there. There are so many federations out there. So there are so many opportunities out there, whether it's remote or whether you can go abroad and you can go travelling with these federations. Didn't really see that when I started out. So, there are people who get in touch with me and go, how'd you get into commentary, that sort of thing. Don't spread your wings too far, otherwise you could get yourself into a bit of bother, and it could be too much. But certainly explore other sports. Everybody would want to become a football commentator, and do Premier League matches and that sort of thing. But at the same time, if you can go and do an Olympic Games, or you can do a Commonwealth Games, or I don't know, even a Southeast Asian Games, so you get to travel and you get to explore cultures and that sort of thing, but also expend your knowledge on certain sports. It's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing at all. And those commentary techniques that you can take from one sport into another as well will only help you in your overall development as a commentator, I think.
Mm-hmm. How much research goes into when you're prepping for like, say, the Futsal World Cup? Let's take that as an example, because you've recently just done that. How much research did you have to do prior to that and prior to the games itself?
Yeah, so I started my prep a good couple of months before I went out there, and then the official squads will get released, so you can then, if you've done a player and then they're not in the squad, you can take them out. I mean, for some of those futsal nations as well, who are up and coming, there's not a lot of information out there, or you've got to really dig deep to try and find certain stuff. And then you get in touch with press officers from the federations, and they can provide you with certain things. But yeah, and it was the same with the Olympics. It was a good sort of couple of months prior. I was lucky that I did hockey, so I knew a lot of the nations, I knew a lot of the players anyway. But still, you want to get down your absolute best prep and research, and watch as much as you can as well to find out different player styles and things like that. So yeah, it takes a bit. It certainly takes a bit. And then once you're there, you're constantly updating everything whilst you're there. So it doesn't really stop. Your off days, you might get the chance to go out and just see a little bit. But then for me, I would always be then coming back, and I'd be head down in the laptop and updating everything, making sure everything was right for the next day. Are
you a laptop man when it comes to being in the stands, having it all there, or do you have the handwritten notes outstretched in front of you?
Print out. Yeah, everything printed out. Yeah. Just because there are some places where there's just no room for your laptops in certain gantries, non-league gantries in particular.
Yeah.
And although I was at Man City women against Barcelona in the Champions League a couple of weeks ago at the Academy Stadium, and it was howling a gale. and my printouts, and they were just all over the place. So, sometimes, if you did just have it on your laptop, it wouldn't be too much of a mess up there. But no, everything's printed out, everything's color-coded and what have you. Yeah, that's just my technique.
I mean, it's old school, isn't it? It seems to be whenever I see commentators sharing what their setup is, some people are really meticulous, aren't they, in terms of how they lay it out? Others are very quite just don't have a lot of information there. But it's clearly something where once you stick to that style, that is your career. That is how you will do it the whole time, I'm sure.
Yeah. I mean, I to be fair, I'm one of those where I will chop and change sometimes to see if it suits me when I shouldn't do, because it could be like mid-season and I'll go from stickers to writing out, and just like, listen, my handwriting's just terrible. So why are you doing this? Why are you putting yourself through this? So then I'll revert back to what I'm comfortable with.
Yeah.
So, we're all weird. We're all different. We all have our different ways of doing it.
So one thing I want to talk about is so during the pandemic, sports were played in front of lots of empty crowds, and it meant that commentators could not get to gantries in the same way that they usually would. And from what you can see, the jump in technology now has meant that you can now commentate on a game from your own living room on a game anywhere in the world. The technology has moved that quickly. When did this really start kicking off, and how often do you think this happens now?
I think it happens a lot now. Yeah, happens a lot now. I do some. There are organisations out there who rely on remote commentary. It helps in terms of cost, helps in terms of carbon footprint. You're not flying everybody here, there and everywhere, or driving everywhere. If you've got a good internet connection at home, you 9 times out of 10 you're sorted. So yeah, it's a bit of a game changer for all different sort of sports. I did a hockey tournament last summer? Yeah, last summer from home, and they were done on like the cameras that you do have like weddings, so they weren't sort of your proper TV cameras, but it meant that they could get commentary on it. You could do a full tournament, and it would save the federation, a bit of money that can go elsewhere, and you still get to watch good hockey at the same time. So yeah, I think it's here to stay, and it's convenience as well for people. I do it myself. It's great. You can do a gig and then at home, and then you can go downstairs and deal with the kids at dinner time and at bedtimes and that sort of thing. And you've not had to travel very far. So yeah, I think the pandemic was a big thing. It was for us in terms of working on the Bundesliga as well. We were fortunate that we were the first league back, but then the technologies that they then brought in to help us do games is pretty insane. And I think, if you've got a good internet connection at home, you can do pretty much anything, really.
It's really just the working from home revolution, really. It's just like little bits that you see, particularly in this industry, which I guess many people, you wouldn't make that assumption that the commentator on the sport you're watching is sat in a living room playing into a mic via a very good internet connection. It is quite crazy, but obviously, as you say, this means that the opportunities to to provide commentary on events anywhere in the world is now just within just a moment's reach.
Yeah, just turn your laptop on, and the federations or whoever you're working for will have certain ways of hooking you up if you like, and then all you need to do is just press record or press on and off you go. It's mad. It is absolutely mad. But you could be doing a skiing event from wherever. From you're at home in Manchester or whatever, and at the top of the Alps, and it's ridiculous. And you can the other great thing about it as well is you could be working with somebody who's in a different country on the other side of the world as your co-commentator, and you wouldn't even notice. So it's
fascinating because. I can envisage this being the norm in the future because, as you say, for all the benefits that opportunity then brings. And obviously for those, our audience for this podcast is very much for not just our alumni, but also our students that are coming up in this field and wanting to learn about these opportunities. And It's interesting because do you think having the on-the-ground experience that you developed early on in your career is essential now for you being able to take these tasks on with a bit more panache than if you hadn't had those opportunities to be at games, and then because you are trying to build up the experience of an on-the-ground commentary from the comfort of your own living room. So do you think those that have a bit more experience will be more better suited to these kind of roles rather than those that necessarily haven't done a lot of games and stuff and they're trying to find their feet?
There's nothing better than being at a venue, at a stadium. You feel everything. You feel the crowd. You feel the emotion of the players as well. You get to talk to people. You get to talk to colleagues. You can find out other bits of information. In the hockey's really good because you can get close to the players, talk to the players. There's nothing better than being there. It's when you're kind of having to psych yourself up when you're at home to feel and think like you are there. So me, for example, I will crank up the volume on my cans to make me think and feel like I am actually at the venue. It's different. It's different, but it's life and it's the way that the industry is evolving. And I guess you could say nowadays, if you are coming into it, those sort of groundings there. You can take into being a commentator remotely, but if you're just solely doing it remotely, it's just not the same.
No,
it's not the same. And if you can more be at a venue, then they will give you the grounding and the experiences that you need to do it wherever, whether you're on site or off site, off tube.
That's fascinating insight, Chris. It really is. I think it is absolutely game-changing for this industry. But obviously, as we've just talked about, that there are so many things that you've got to take into consideration with that and in terms of where the games go. It's just fascinating just how quickly technology is moving in that regard. Do you need to have a really big TV to have the game on in front of you? Does that help?
It helps. Yeah, it helps. I only have a little one, probably the size of your monitor, probably in front of you. Yeah. But as long as it's clear and what have you, then off you go.
Is there any weird thing that you've done remote commentary on? I say weird, I'm trying to think of a weird example of what that would actually sound like, but any I don't guess a Division 3 game or something in Bolivia or something, which you've done remote commentary. Has it gone to that extent yet for you?
Not that bad, no. I mean, those games were all done down in booths, proper booths down at a company in southwest London. It was, but no, nothing too. I mean, I've had moments where my internet's gone down, so I've lost connection and
what happens in that sense?
So it was sort of early days of when we were coming back after the pandemic, and I was doing a game, and you're live and. Yeah, my internet kept going down, and then I was getting notifications going, on our group going, "Oh, we can't hear Chris," or "Chris is really behind the play," and that sort of thing. And I couldn't get in contact with people on the other side, and it was horrible. It was absolutely. And then you're sort of resetting your box or what have you to then come back on again, and you're praying you don't miss a goal. And it was all to do. It was just my internet was slow. It's too slow. And it is rank horrible. It really is. So that was probably the worst experience.
Okay.
That I've had doing remote comms. So like I say, if you've got a good internet connection, you're all right.
Fine.
If you've got a rubbish one, then you could be struggling a bit.
I mean, I guess that's just a pitfall with kind of relying on that kind of technology, isn't it?
And it could happen if you were in a studio as good as this and something goes and happens. But it's the feeling of, okay, it's my issue. If it was in somewhere like this, well, it's somebody else's issue, and I'm not getting into trouble for this.
Yeah.
Not that I got into trouble for it, but the pressure's not on my shoulders, whereas it was then, and it was rank horrible.
So we've talked a little bit about what students, I guess, should be thinking, or graduates even be thinking about in terms of the future of sports commentary, but. If you could then give kind of your best bit of advice for a student or a new graduate that is looking to break into sports commentary, obviously the route that you did is a bit different now to how they would go about it. But what would be your advice for a newcomer in this industry?
Be patient.
Mm-hmm.
There are a ton of opportunities out there. It's a case of being patient, and if you're good enough, those opportunities will come. It sounds really sort of lame, but somebody said that to me once, and it was like, right, okay. That gave me the boost to go and do certain things. But it's very different. I had that in, if you like, with Channel M, a local TV. That just doesn't happen anymore. And then going through working on those really random matches at 3 a.m. without a team sheet on certain leagues that you just haven't got a clue about in certain remote areas of the world. And, that was a good in, that was a good ground. That doesn't exist anymore. So getting into sort of, if you make it as local as you can, clubs are really expanding now in terms of, club TV. Social media is a big thing now. I don't quite understand that route because I don't really sort of go down that route, but I'm sure there are more openings sort of there as well. But just be patient. It's a tough gig. And there are a lot of people who want to do it, and you've just got to put yourself out there, make yourself who you are, and the opportunities will come, but you've got to make them come rather than let them come to you.
No, thanks for that, Chris. That's really helpful to hear. So now we're going to do Fast Five. So these are quick fire questions. I guess the first answer that comes to mind, please. So. Oh, I feel like I already know the answer to this first one, but I had it down anyway. But yeah, we're not just talking about football in here. I should start that off with. Who is the GOAT in sports commentary?
Martin Tyler.
Martin Tyler, yeah.
For me, yeah. Absolutely. And I mean, I know he's mainly football, but still he's the Don for me. Is it the goal or is it just the voice? Both. I mean, every commentator has their way of calling things, but I mean, if you go back to when he called that Aguero moment,
I know,
sorry, but if you go back to that and just how he called it, let it go, and then said something like, "I swear you'll never see anything like this ever again."
Yeah, it's been played and played over again.
There you go.
The years,
There's your example.
Yeah, Gary Neville's having a few of those moments, I feel like I have to say, in the last 10 years. Not always for effect, sometimes for comedic purposes. Yeah. That is always the risk, I guess, of being a sports commentator. Okay, so next one. Something you've said on air by accident that still mortifies you to this very day.
Could be quite a few things, to be honest. No, I can think off the top of my head. I've got words mixed up and the sounding of words mixed up.
Okay.
Which I did once, and it wasn't live. Thank God it wasn't live, and they were able to change it in the edit. There was a player and a word that I wanted to say and got it wrong, and it really didn't sound a great word. Which I don't think I could probably say.
We are a family-friendly podcast.
Yeah,
we'll
so I'm not going to say
it.
It wasn't really bad. It was just innocent.
Yeah,
and that still gets me now, sort of 10 years on. Jumbling words to make a word which doesn't sound right. Let's put it that way.
I'm so glad that wasn't live because those are 100% the moments that get clipped up these days, aren't they?
Tell me, but yeah. Straight away I said it, wrote it down, and went into the edit booth and went, "You've got to go back to this minute, listen, and cut it out."
Oh dear.
Yeah.
So you've been to the Olympics recently for both Tokyo and Paris, but where would you recommend for a holiday then? Would you rather go to Tokyo or would you rather go to Paris?
I would say Tokyo, because I never experienced Tokyo properly.
Yeah.
Because it was COVID. And you know, by the time my green thing on the app said, yes, you are 14 days, you've been here, you've not tested positive, you may go and explore.
Yeah.
I was getting on an aeroplane coming home. So I never actually saw any of Tokyo, just on a coach, whatever the route was to the IBC or to the venue. So I'd say probably Tokyo, and so I could go and enjoy it a bit more. And I mean, Paris is great, but yeah, Tokyo.
Fair enough. What's the best match you've ever commentated
on? Best match I've ever commentated on.
It could also be the most enjoyable experience you've had on a gantry, really, at a game.
I was in the Netherlands a couple of years ago for hockey, and it was Netherlands against Belgium, who were the top nations, and they gave everything to each other, and that was a really good insight for me, developing as a hockey commentator as well. So I'd put that right up there. It was the second game in Den Bosch, I think it was, and the Netherlands won 3-2, I think it was, but it was just insane. It was backwards and forwards. But yeah, I'd probably say that there's been some great Bundesliga games that I've done over the years, most recently last season as well, including involving Bayer Leverkusen, and leaving it late as they usually do to win in the last minute. So that was they were great moments. So yeah, I couldn't really pick one off the top of my head, but those two certainly stand out.
No, I think that's fair enough. Oh, they scraped their luck a lot last year. Loads of last minute goals. That must have been an absolute joy to commentate on, particularly because I come from the journalism background, and as the writing journalist, that's always the last thing you want is a last minute goal.
Yeah.
But commentator,
oh no, bring it on!
It's brilliant. Yeah, it's great. It's the best thing about about doing the job, really. So yeah, go on then. So, what has been your what league do you enjoy the most commentating on? What's the most entertaining league to talk about?
I'm going to say Bundesliga because that's what I work on sort of most, if not every weekend. I've just started again with the National League. So, and they are great. They're great stories. I mean, the National League, you wouldn't really class it as non-league anymore. It's probably Division 4, if you like.
Yeah.
But they're great stories to tell, going on all rickety gantries as well. Proper football, as some would probably say. But Bundesliga has been great. It's been great for me. The stories have been great. You can find out so much stuff in the German press and stories and whimsy, as we call it. And entertaining, plenty of goals, plenty of drama at the end. Yeah, what's not to like?
How's your German?
It's a good job I do it in English, let's put it that way. That's all I'll say.
Because you obviously you go to Germany occasionally, don't you? So
I mean, I can, like any lazy Brit going abroad, I can order something in a restaurant or something like that. But yeah,
it's not giving you a desire to really dig deep into that language, then.
Try.
Try. Yeah.
But there's only a certain amount of things you can learn off Duolingo and what have you.
True. Very true.
And I mean, we used to go every weekend, but then, COVID hit and then Brexit hit and it made just life a little bit more difficult to go over. So, we'll leave it at that.
So, that does bring us a close today then. Look, Chris, thank you so much for coming in to see us this morning.
Oh, it's been great. Thank you.
Oh, it's been great having you. And look, if you've loved this episode, if you want to hear more from us, then do go check us out on YouTube or listen to all previous Talking Salford episodes wherever you get your podcasts. So until then, goodbye.